Welcome to this inaugural episode of the In Spirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join Father Thomas, Anthony, and myself, Chris, as we explore current events and all kinds of fascinating topics and discuss their connections to Christian living.
Right, welcome everyone. After a long summer hiatus, it's good to be back. A little change of form here. We have Chris Camerata, we have Dr. Anthony Kunenperth, and my name is Father Thomas Pullicle. And we'll kind of be the stable crew as we go forward with this podcast of In Spirit. So summer brought a lot of adventures for everyone. I know I myself was traveling almost continuously. But Anthony did the most interesting travel of all, I believe.
Yeah.
Because he literally went to the Amazon jungle for mission.
A regular seminary and summer assignment.
Yeah, not exactly. Now, I'm under the impression that he used a kind of like a euphemism for the Amazon when talking to his family. He always said he was going to Peru. He never said he was going to the Amazon. So hopefully they won't be listening to this and find out. First of all, Anthony, tell us, what were you doing in the Amazon?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So I went to the Amazonian rainforest. And for those of you who don't know, the Amazonian rainforest includes more than 8 countries. So Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and 3 smaller countries. And so I had the opportunity to go to Peru in the Amazonian rainforest in Peru, and I went with an organization called Catholic Mission Doctors Association. And so they help physicians with opportunities for mission, especially in countries in Latin America and Africa. And so I was able to go there and work as a physician in Peru in the Amazonian rainforest. Yeah,
so I found that very interesting the first time you told me, because I had no idea the Amazon was that big.
Yeah.
And it covers how many countries did you say?
More than 7 countries, large countries. And so ecclesiastically, that's divided into 105 dioceses. Wow. So among the 7 countries, it has its own episcopal conference called Conference Episcopal Pan Amazonia. So it's 105 dioceses. 70% of that is Brazil. The Amazon is Brazil, like geographically and ecclesiastically. But after that, it's probably Peru. I would say Peru is around 11%. So within Peru, there's 8 dioceses, or vicariates as they call it, apostolic vicariates. And I went to one of those apostolic vicariates called Vicariato Apostolico San Jose de Amazonas. So it was actually started by Canadian missionaries that first came to this particular vicariate, and they had a patronage towards Saint Joseph, and so that's why it was named San Jose de Amazonas.
Was there like a certain reason you picked Peru, or was it sort of chosen for you?
No, so you go with Catholic Mission Doctors Association, you kind of go, they have a retreat that they ask you to attend, like in April before you go, and there they explain the different mission sites. So they explained, they presented Africa, so Ghana, Uganda, and then in Latin America they presented, I believe it was Honduras and Peru. I guess in a way it was kind of like in my heart to go to the Amazonian rainforest, probably just reading like the Amazonian encyclical and, different things like that. And so
this heroic image of like braving the jungles, like the old Jesuits in North America.
Yeah, something like that, like the movie Mission, right?
Yeah, the Mission.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah, so I guess there was
that was kind of basically what you experienced, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was that.
You went on was it an 8-hour?
Yeah. So the travel itself is pretty amazing. So I flew in from Miami to Lima. Lima is the capital of Peru, and from Lima I fly into Iquitos. Iquitos is a 1.5-hour domestic flight, and Iquitos opens into the Amazon River, and
you just take Uber.
Yeah, unfortunately there is no roads within the Amazonian jungle, so everyone travels by boat. So I took a 9-hour boat from Iquitos to reach my mission site, which is called Santa Clotilde. It's a 9-hour boat, and it's called Rápido because actually it is pretty fast. But yeah, so we start at 5 a.m. and we reach by 2 p.m.
Wow.
But there is a slower boat you can take, but that takes 18 hours, 19 hours that you can take.
Wow.
But the 9-hour boat is pretty cool.
What were you doing there? And also in general, what is the Catholic Mission Doctors Association? Like, what is their purpose and function?
Yeah, I would say their broad purpose is to help help serve the wider church in general in terms of healthcare, but also in terms of physicians here in the United States, help them find that missionary journey that they're looking for, help them to find opportunities for mission that they're looking for, both short term and long term. So they do have a 1 year to 3 year commitments that they expect from their long term missionaries. And for short terms, at least 2 to 3 months is what they expect. And they're very, I would say, like, they're very much focused on not just single missionaries. Like, many of the missionaries are long term, or go with families. And so all their mission sites are very family friendly, and the kids grow up there, and they see that as a vital aspect of the Christian formation of a person, like going on mission, and even for children too. So that's what Catholic Mission Doctors Association. They work mainly with the diocese and the churches mainly. So the different bishops or the diocese they come in contact with, and they say, hey, this is the needs of our diocese in terms of healthcare, and can you help us provide the expertise that is needed for that?
There are a lot of different types of mission trips.
Yeah.
Sometimes people from America will go to other countries.
I remember that was when we first met. We met going to Haiti together.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Chris came and visited in Haiti.
Yeah, I mean, so people go to other countries, and then they'll do things like build houses or paint houses. People who have never built a house before or painted a house before. And then it makes you wonder, is this really something that they need? Do they need people to come here who don't know how to paint and paint their houses, or is it for the experience? This sounds different. I mean, would you say there's a genuine deficiency of healthcare there that is being filled by people coming in through this program?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially in this region of Peru, in the Amazonian rainforest, it is the closest hospital they have, like on the river. So the river is 9 hours one way downstream, and probably maybe 18 hours upstream. So this is the only hospital that they have. And when I say hospital, this is like, it's not like a big hospital. It's like 25 beds. And they don't have an intensive care unit, or they have mainly volunteer physicians. So when I was there, they had a full-time family medicine physician, a full-time pediatrician, and then 2 Peruvian doctors. And then they rely on volunteers a lot. And so in terms of specialist care, there really is no, like, when I was there was an ophthalmology camp who was doing cataract surgeries. That happens once a year. So there really is a lack of accessibility for the people there, because just in terms of, if this is the only hospital in an 18-hour distance, then, how are they going to even reach there? And then for the people there too, they don't have enough of a workforce to even supply physicians to this hospital, right? So it's for them like, when you think of a local Peruvian doctor, probably it's so far away for them to come work there, live there. And so many of even the Peruvian doctors there, they're not necessarily from that town. They just come to work, and then they once they're done with their shifts of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they end up going back home too. So yeah, I would say there's definitely a need for physicians, for specialized care, for sure. Which,
like, when you go to these communities, you're seeing people who desperately need medical attention.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was one of the most striking things that I remember, doing outpatient clinic, where patients come to you in your office while in Santa Clotilde. And I remember talking to a lady. She said, like, yeah, I've been having the stomach pain. It's been going on for a month. I was like, oh, why did you wait a month? And she's like, well, I live a day away. And so, I just thought it would go. But then, like, yeah, it kind of hits you, right? Like, wow, this person traveled a day by boat to come and see me. And I'm here spending 20 minutes with them, and, hoping that she'll get better. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lack of accessibility that I experienced there, for sure.
And you really saw it from a doctor's perspective, because of course it was a mission, but it was a mission where you were functioning as a full, like, medical doctor, like, licensed and practicing.
Yeah.
It, as you said before, more than just painting a house. So you really had, like, an inside perspective on the whole sort of medical system or lack of medical system in the region.
Yeah. I mean, I would say so it's interesting. The medical system there, so the hospital is run by the vicariate, by the government, the local government, and an NGO together. So there's really that's one of the insights that I saw there was the church and state are kind of in it together.
Right.
There's no this is the church, this is the state. It's all run together. So
we're kind of used to seeing a very sharp divide between public and private healthcare.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas this is that kind of fades away.
Yeah, exactly. And they're just trying to make things work, so that's the thing. People don't have access to healthcare.
Right.
And we just want healthcare. And what can we do together to make this happen? And so that's what kind of happened. So the employees, half of them are government, half of them are paid by the church. I come with Mission Doctors Association, so we are mainly working with the vicariate and that side. But then the nurses, they're all government employees. The admin staff is all government employees. It's around 80 people in general, and I would say 50 people are paid by the government, and around 30 by the church. But then medicine supplies comes from the government. But then if you rely only on the government for medicine supplies, then there might be shortages. So then the church adds on to that and helps them.
Right.
So so it's all collaboration and working together too. Yeah. So it's a really different system, I would say.
Now, could you help us visualize some of this stuff? I know you have a series of photos.
Yeah, for sure. So
maybe if you can even just show us what the Amazon looks like geographically.
This is the whole Amazon rainforest. So that includes Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guyana. And as you can see from the picture, majority is Brazil. And then maybe after that, it's Peru. And then Bolivia, northern Bolivia, southern Colombia, southern Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guyana. So this whole region together constitutes the Amazonian rainforest, where the Amazon River runs right through the middle, and then its tributaries spread out. And all this region together has 105 dioceses, basically.
And so you're in Peru.
Yeah, I go to Peru. So I fly into Lima, which is the capital, and then I take a plane to Iquitos. So Iquitos opens into the Amazonian River.
Mm-hmm.
And then within Peru, there are 8 dioceses, like I said, and this is one of the dioceses called Vicariato Apostólico San José de Amazonas. And so I go into Iquitos, and all those those crosses are mission sites, and mine is Santa Clotilde. So from Iquitos to Santa Clotilde, it's 9 hours by Rapido. And then, to go from one end of the diocese to the other, it takes a week by boat.
Wow.
So it's a whole other reality in that sense. I think that was one thing that struck me, the reality of the church that in general. And
you can really see how the river really defines everything here.
Yeah.
It's all the mission sites are along the river, obviously no roads.
Yeah.
Is that the Amazon River?
Yeah, this is the Amazon River.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a huge respect from the people too for the Amazonian River. One, it provides so much for the people in terms of forest. It's a huge nourishment for the forest in general, and they get all their food from the forest.
Right.
And then also the fish and everything that they get from the Amazon River.
Sure.
So there's a real respect, but also the boats don't go at night. You don't travel by boat at night. That's why they wait till sunrise to sunset is when the boats go.
What's the reason for that?
It's because of the one is you need to see the river because there's different depths of it.
Okay.
So they need to see it. And also, there can be currents and animals and things like that. So they don't travel at night with the Amazon River, and they don't even the main river. They won't go swimming in it because of the animals and things there.
Any piranhas?
There's definitely piranhas there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, piranhas is a big real deal there. So they don't have piranhas. Even the snakes are a big deal there.
Wow.
Yeah, so snake bites are pretty common. But so they go swimming in the tribute. So they go into tributaries, and the tributaries go into smaller streams that have no currents and usually no animals, and that's where you can go swimming and things. So
okay.
Yeah.
Now you said that the hospital, when you say the word hospital, it's kind of a loose usage of the word hospital, right?
Yeah.
Do you have anything that could show us what the facilities look like there?
Yeah, so this is a sign of the hospital. So if you look at it, it says Vicariato Apostólico San José de Amazonas. Then Geresa which is the name of the governmental organization that runs healthcare. And then Bango is the NGO. So or the nonprofit that together they run the hospital in general. And this is kind of what the hospital so this is what the hospital corridors. And one of the beautiful things of the hospital is around 80 employees, and it starts at 7 a.m. with morning rounds. But at 7 a.m. we start with prayer. And usually the sisters there, we have 2 chameleon sisters, and they lead the day with a reflection and a prayer. And so all the 70 employees come together. So that's another beautiful thing, I guess, about having this run all together by church, state, separate.
That might be the one part that's better than our healthcare system here.
It's one hand feeding the other, it seems like.
Yeah, it is. And this is the Amazon River. This is the boats by which the people travel.
They're kind of like large canoes, really.
Yeah, large canoes, and they have a motor at the back. They call this a peke. And then they have these motors at the back that they can detach, and then they fill it up with gas, and then they travel around. So that's what the people travel by. But yeah, just in general also, like if you look at this, so Santa Clotilde is that, and the next mission post is Angoteros, which is another 9 hours. In between these areas, there's all these smaller communities that are living.
Right.
And so there's no real access for people there to healthcare or, anything like that. So, Santa Clotilde is the main mission post, and it was remote for me, but for the people there, there's even more remote sites that you see.
And at those sites, like those outposts, would there be a building that was designated as a clinic, or is it literally just walking into people's homes like a kind of an old style physician?
No, so Santa Clotilde is the only place here that has a hospital. So a hospital meaning they have an outpatient clinic, inpatient beds. They don't have an obstetrician gynecologist, which is like for labor and delivery. They usually have similar to what we call midwives. They just help. They're trained professionals to help with normal deliveries. So they have those. But other than that, there's no hospitals. In the other places, they have what they call health post, and usually it's either sometimes many of the places what they have is a community health worker, which is a person who's like trained for some basic health, and basically their main thing is they know when to refer them to Santa Clotilde and when they need, that's their main thing, and deal with
triaging basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have some basic medicines that they have, but yeah. So all these other places have no access in general.
Right. So like at best in the clinic, you're looking at, general access to basic medicine, beds.
You're talking places other than Santa Clotilde, right?
Sorry, this is in Santa Clotilde. You're getting access to essentially. Yeah,
you get access to meds. There's an emergency room, so there's always a doctor on call 24/7.
Right.
You get access to labor and delivery. So if you're pregnant towards term, you can come stay there. And then, so even people from far off places, they have a home for mothers, things like that. So.
But then if you're out on the sites, like in the remote regions, it's really just what you bring with you at that point.
Yeah. So in that sense, it was a little challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. And look at compared to the caliber of healthcare we have in America. I'm just thinking of the Texas Medical Center, which is like one of the largest medical complexes in the world. It's like a city of just hospital buildings.
Yeah.
Or, even the average outpatient clinic is going to be running equipment in the, probably the 8 figures range, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
It's just such a staggering difference in scale compared to what we're used to in our healthcare system.
Yeah.
Well, it's money, but it's also just the fact that for us, if you have the slightest health issue or concern, you immediately you can just go to your doctor. You could just go to
ER.
Go to
ER.
Now you can do telehealth.
You could do telehealth.
Schedule a telehealth appointment.
So, people get a cold and they go to see a doctor, because they think, oh, well, maybe I need a prescription medicine or whatever. And so you try to imagine the daily life of people living here. First of all, I would imagine they're more prone to illnesses just because of the fact that they're living in the Amazon.
Yeah, infectious disease is a big thing.
Yeah, infectious disease, probably malaria.
Malaria is
all kinds of stuff. So they're more prone to illnesses, and yet it's such a big endeavor for them to have to go and get health care.
Yeah.
They would have to potentially travel for a day to be able to see someone who can actually help them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's
Even-
hard for us to imagine a life like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about how do you even properly gauge in that situation the right time to see the doctor? Because you got to travel for a day.
Yeah.
So obviously you're only going to go when it's serious. But if you go when it's too serious, you're not going to travel anywhere because you're going to be bedridden. So even just having the ability to just be able, like, just to try and postpone care to the last possible second, and half the time it could be too late.
Which is interestingly what people do here anyway. I mean, postpone care to the last minute. I mean, well, mainly I'm speaking about myself, I guess. I think, man, doctor's 15 minutes away. I don't know. I can wait this one out.
Pencil it in?
No, but
Yeah.
yeah, also just the access we have to testing here in America, right? Like, you come to a hospital, you want a CT scan or you go on an MRI, you can get it like that. Versus there, we have the only imaging we have is ultrasound at Santa Clotilde, and then if you need a CT scan or MRI, we have to make a decision. Does this patient really warrant a CT scan? And because it implies, first of all, we're gonna have to send them by boat or air taxi 9 hours away to get a CT scan, and then sometimes if they do need a CT scan at that hospital, then the patient ends up having to pay for it. And so there's all these factors that come into play versus here, oh, my head hurts. Oh, maybe it is, something serious. I need to get a CT scan. So I think, yeah, it makes you think about a lot of the privileges we have here.
Right.
And even when you think about like epidemics or even pandemics, like really large scale diseases that just hit everybody, you start to see how they don't hit everybody evenly after a while. Like, for instance, something like cancer or COVID. I mean, cancer is not an epidemic, but when you have a serious disease, it's something of like an equalizer. Like, everyone's going to get hit hard if they get hit with this.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at how in America, we had vaccines rolling out for COVID in under a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then even with cancer treatments, like, we have access to the most
most
advanced treatments for cancer. Yeah, like immunotherapy, like Keytruda is like $28,000 a vial. But and then you start to see how even our serious illnesses, which are supposed to be something of an equalizer, they don't really become that after a while anymore, just from the sheer amount of access we have to, things to combat it.
Yeah. So there's no doubt there's a significant and non-negligible disparity of healthcare in different parts of the world. You've seen that firsthand as a physician.
Yeah.
You've worked here as a physician. You've worked
There,
in places like that as a physician, as well as in Haiti. What does that leave you with? How do you feel, having seen the disparity? I mean, like,
Yeah, I guess,
how do you process that?
Yeah, I think, one thing for sure is you're very grateful for where you are right now, and the amazing things that we have access to. So there's definitely gratitude for what we have here in America, and just all the amazing technology that America has, and the health, the access to healthcare for a patient with no insurance, or Medicare, Medicaid. There's so many amazing things that America does. So there's definitely gratitude there. But I guess it also makes you think of like in places like this, right? Like, what is my response? What can I do as a physician as well? This is not something, like, even as a physician, I believe for me it's a gift given to me from God, and it's not something that, obviously using my intellect and using my capabilities, God's allowed me to be a physician, but also what is this gift meant for? And so I think in that sense, you want to try to use it to help others. And so there's a sense of, sharing this gift with others when you go to places like this. And so, when the work there is very rewarding. So, you are actually making a difference in people's lives, and you experience that and you see that, and and
so immediately too.
Yeah, which is here too, but yeah.
It sounds like you take on a sense of personal responsibility or a sense of mission.
Yeah.
which is obviously a great thing. I wish that were the case. Whenever we see problems in the world, if we all sat and said, what does this mean for me? That would probably be the most substantial response. Usually we try to figure out whose fault it is and blame the system or whatever, rather than looking at our own responsibility. Do you think that going on mission trips is an important thing for people living in the first world?
Yeah, I think, it probably exposes, I think one thing for mission trips is it brings you to a new reality of beyond yourself, that I think, if you've grown up in a certain reality of first world, then probably, it takes you out of a new reality and expands your mind in ways of, this is what life can look like, and makes you ask questions of, why was I, in this position versus them in this position? And so, I think in that sense, it can stir that question of, what is my response in that situation? I think mission, that's probably your one way of stirring that question of, it stirs that question in you of, what is my response in, not just in this situation, but in every situation in life here. And here in the U.S. too, it's the same. There's so many things that we could, ask ourselves that same question: what is my responsibility, right, to many of the problems?
Yeah, I was just thinking back to, like we said before, we met for the first time in Haiti, and you spent much more time in Haiti than I did. But I remember very viscerally experiencing, after coming back from one of those trips, just being back home, and there were some friends over, and somebody opened the fridge and was just like, oh, there's nothing to eat here. And of course there was something to eat. The fridge was full. And I just remember getting so viscerally angry at hearing that. And he hadn't done anything wrong. It was just like an idle remark. But, when you see true hunger and true poverty, you feel it in your gut almost.
Yeah.
And we talk about with mission trips, how as much as we go to serve the poor in these situations, in a strange way, their life, their reality administers to us in some way. And for me, it was something of a system shock, I think. But when I also look back on that experience, one of the other things I recall too is what am I really doing for these people in the long term? I didn't like the feeling of just kind of being I don't know, like a special forces agent, just dropping in from a foreign country and doing some work that made me feel good and leaving.
Yeah.
That didn't seem adequate to me.
At best, you'd be like special forces dropping in.
Right.
You might actually be more like a tourist, where the attraction is poverty. I mean,
right. Voluntourism, that's like a thing.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Poverty tourism, yeah.
Yeah, right. So that would be the worst case scenario. But there's this flip side, which I think you presented really well. If it stirs up in people deep questions, which could then cause them to devote their lives to good in some way, I guess there could be a long-term benefit, perhaps.
What do you think, Father, as priest working with young people, and you've worked with many young people, the idea of a young person going on a mission trip? And
I think it's essential.
Yeah.
I think it's essential because, in general, it's always beneficial to meet people, to encounter concrete realities rather than just reading about them or watching videos about them.
Yeah.
And that includes a wide variety of things, not just poverty. You want to travel if you can, if you have the opportunity, to different places in the world and see different cultures, possibly even different value systems. That would expand your mind, Some of it might be very uncomfortable too. Some of it might lead you to question things, and all of that is good. So in general, I'd say exposure for a young person is extremely valuable because it makes a mind more flexible, and ultimately, like you said, it prompts them to deep questions, which I think is beneficial. Now, obviously, we have to do it responsibly. The travel shouldn't add any strain to the populations that you're visiting. You know what I mean? That would be a very bad thing. But I don't know if we should call it mission.
Mm.
That would be my one thing. I don't think we should call it mission. I don't think it is mission.
Mission exposure? No.
Do we even call it volunteering? I mean, it's a kind of volunteering. But then,
I don't
like you
even
said,
think
it
it's
can also be-
volunteering.
It can also be like volunteerism.
No, maybe
like
it's
we were saying.
volunteering. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but yeah, I mean, it can be an exposure to a mission that is being done by someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you have these religious orders, beautiful priests and sisters and lay people that they're out there for years. They've sacrificed their own preference. They've sacrificed their preference for their own culture, their own food, their own relationships, their own economic level to actually live with and be part of a different people than their own.
Yeah.
Like we see in so many of the saints. And that's mission. I mean, that is mission.
Yeah.
And I guess you can say that this is exposure to mission.
To that mission.
You're going and staying with them and seeing the way in which they carry out the mission. I think that could be good.
As much as every time that we serve, it does something edifying for ourselves, I think you do see a fundamental difference in these, we'll call it mission exposures, versus people who are there as true missionaries. I mean, obviously, the worst case is like someone's going really for their own leisure, but let's ignore that. Even when we go for these mission exposure things, a lot of times it's so that we can learn something or receive something spiritually, which is good. But at the end of the day, it's still something that I'm going to receive for myself. Like that kind of is the principal focus. Whereas
consumerism.
Yeah, sort of
Of a
spiritual
different kind. Yeah.
consumerism. But then you look at people who are there as true missionaries. I'm just thinking of somebody I met where her and her husband just moved out into the middle of rural Appalachia, and they've been running a medical clinic for 20 years. And at a certain point, it's not about, you can't be in a place that long and let your only concern be, what am I going to get out of this? At a certain point, you would burn out. It has to become something that's giving, where giving becomes the main motive at some point. And it seems to me like that's the fundamental difference when you have people who go out into the mission field and their motive really is mission. They will receive, of course, but they're really operating out of an overflow of that thing that they've received from the Lord at that point, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, why do people even have that desire to go on mission, right? Like, if we're living in the first world and we're very comfortable and, we're good with how things are, why do even people, I've always thought about, like, why do people want to go even on a mission exposure program, So I think there's something in our heart that we're,
True.
yeah.
And that itself is something admirable. I mean, because obviously not everyone goes for mission exposure even.
Yeah.
Even that temporary inconvenience can be too much for people,
Right.
No electricity or whatever.
Yeah.
You can go on a hiking trip and get that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also like a pan-human experience, this exposure idea. Because, for instance, you look at prior to Christianity, the whole story and sort of mythology in a sense of the life of Buddha, like how he was a sheltered prince who never left his home. And like he had this radical life-changing event just when he left the walls and saw suffering for the first time. That was actually
I did not know. That's the story.
Yeah, and that was what actually led him to go and meditate under a tree and
Wow.
Develop this idea of that, like, there's suffering in the world and it's because of selfishness, and like that changed the whole course of his life. And this is, even prior to Christianity. So there seems to be something innate in our human experience that tells us that, we need to see a little bit more of the world. And my experience is not bad. There's a lot of good in it, but there's also so much more out there than what I know and what I understand, and I need to see it and like touch it and experience it.
Realities are greater than ideas. Yeah. The whole
Yeah, I think
Evangelion thing.
Exactly.
When you see a suffering person, you see a reflection of yourself in some real way. Even the sheltered person, this prince who's sheltered in these walls, when you see the suffering person, you kind of realize your own mortality and frailty, which has always been there, but you've been blinded to it.
Mm.
We are all poor
We are all poor. And actually, I remember when I went to Haiti. So Anthony was for our listeners, Anthony was in Haiti for a year, about a year. And so during that time, I went and stayed with him.
You've been there before,
I've
too.
been there before that. I think this was before that. The first time that I went to Haiti, what hit me in seeing some of these suffering children and people was the realization that there's no difference between this young man and myself. I mean, like, I just happened to be born in America.
Yeah.
In that sense, right? I mean, and then because I was born in America, there's innumerable opportunities that have been set before me my entire life. And then I just chose whichever ones that I happened to like. And I pursued that path and I enjoyed the benefits of that. If I happened to be born right where this young man was born, I wouldn't have any of those opportunities. You know what I mean? So I was almost like a swap in my mind. I was like, he could have been where I am and I could have been where he is. And to me, that was a powerful thing.
Yeah. And I think those are the kind of things that makes you think about, those questions of what did I do to deserve this? Or even like, what do I now do with the things that I have,
Right.
Now I understand how much of a gift that whatever I have is, and what is my responsibility now with these gifts.
Like
I think those are the kind of questions that start stirring up.
And like, there's that story of, now I forget which saint it was, but, he watched a criminal condemned go off to his execution and just said, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." And I think there's something analogous here. It's like, fundamentally, we're all poor. We're not taking anything with us. There's a reason that poverty is the first beatitude, poverty or poverty of spirit. And
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And what you just said actually reminds me of a quote from St. Clement. I think it comes up in the Office of Readings. I'm pretty sure it does. And whenever I read it, it really strikes me to the core, And it's from the early church, St. Clement, who's like the third pope or something like that,
first century.
Yeah, I mean, so it's from the early church, and yet it gives a beautiful way of reconciling the problem of disparity with our call as Christians. It's like we recognize, yes, some people have more than others. It's just a fact. It's just a reality. But then what does that mean for us as Christians? Actually, maybe we could read that.
Sure.
Quote right now. You have it up
Pull
there.
it up. Yeah. So what St. Clement says is, "Let us then preserve the unity of the body that we form in Christ Jesus, and let everyone give his neighbor the deference to which his particular gifts entitle him. Let the strong care for the weak, and the weak respect the strong. Let the wealthy assist the poor, and the poor man thank God for giving him someone to supply his needs. The wise man should show his wisdom not by his eloquence, but by good works. The humble man should not proclaim his own humility, but leave others to do so. Nor must the man who preserves his chastity ever boast of it, but recognize that the ability to control his desires has been given him by another."
Yeah. So doesn't that sort of capture what we've been talking about right now? I mean, it's the idea that, first of all, it's just being honest about the fact that, look, there are wealthy people in the world. There are poor people in the world.
Right.
There are people who are strong. There are people who are weak. There are people who are healthier. There are people who are more ill. And yet, if you see it all from this framework of, like, what we call in theology the kenosis of God, that God having everything doesn't choose to selfishly keep it all to himself, but rather to selflessly pour himself out for us. Then all of a sudden there's meaning. There's meaning to the disparity.
I think as we were reading the quote, what it reminded me of as well is this idea of one body, that we are one body and we are one community and in Christ together. And so even in my own experiences, whether it's Haiti or Amazon or, other experiences, in the times that I've given, that I've shared my gifts with the people, I've received so much as well. And so it's not just, you're giving and you're trying to address a problem, but I've received so much love for them, so much hospitality from them, so much I've encountered, in a way, Christ himself in the people there. I think that's one aspect of that being one body. We all have different, I guess you can say different functions, but we're all functioning, we're all working together towards one goal of bringing that human person to the fullness. And when I share my gifts, they're sharing their gifts too with me. So I think for me that I've experienced that for sure.
Yeah.
There's something pretty cool about the fact that we're talking about the healing of the body, the physical body, and that somehow that is related to this idea of all of us being one body in Christ as well. There's some kind of a mysterious connection there. I mean, really, the body is, St. Paul's analogy of the body is the most perfect way of explaining all of this stuff. As you rightly pointed out, like, if I can acknowledge the fact that I'm unique from my brother because of just who I am, but also because of my situation and status in life, I can humbly acknowledge that fact. I'm in a different place than my brother, and yet that we are part of the same body, and therefore whatever that I have been given is for the sake of my brother and for all of my brothers and sisters, and vice versa. Like, then there's always mutuality, there's always the bond of charity, and all of our differences actually become beautiful.
Yeah.
Rather than problematic and scandalous.
Right.
They actually become something beautiful.
Yeah, I don't think that when we talk about something like healthcare or just healing in general, like, we would never be able to eliminate all suffering or all poverty or all sickness. Even St. Thomas More in his Utopia spoke against that. We can't eliminate it all. We can't obliterate it all. And so we're not necessarily, when we talk about celebrating the differences, we're not talking about celebrating the fact that some people are healthy and some people are sick, but rather the fact that in these diverse positions and experiences, we have a unique ability to help each other. It seems like the goal is not as much to eliminate all the differences as much as to recognize this is where I stand in the middle of all of it, and this is what I can do about it. The tragedy is doing nothing.
And it's like, here's what I can do about it. That's also kind of interesting. It makes you think, because as you pointed out, we can't eliminate all suffering. So here's what I can do about it. Well, maybe I can't do much. I don't know. Or maybe in some cases I can do more. In some cases I can't do anything. Like, even as a physician or as any person devoted to the care of others, you hit a point where you realize you can't do anything, correct? I mean, you can have a patient come in and realize that there's nothing you could do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Sometimes it's better to do nothing in certain situations, maybe not as a physician, but, like, there's certain cases, like, you might be there trying to listen to somebody who's going through something, and the more you say, the less effective you are.
Yeah, right. So there's some places where you can't do anything, and yet the fact that you're called to come to the service of somebody else who is in suffering, even if you can't do anything, if you can only listen or be there, like, that is the place that's the spontaneous occasion of charity and of self-emptying love. You do what you can. You try to do whatever you can. And this is the experience of so many people who go into mission, right? You go into the mission land, and then you're confronted by enormous need that can never actually be met by you. So you probably go through a crisis at some point. Is there any point? Is there anything I can do? Well, I don't know. Have you ever gone through that crisis?
Yeah, I think as you were saying that, I went to the exact same thing when I went to Haiti the first time, and saw obviously I went there as a physician, and I was like, all gung ho about, like, I'm gonna help them with all their suffering and all their problems they're gonna go through. But when you see the material poverty that they experience, it's beyond anything that you can imagine. And so but it's in those moments that I realized from the people there that how much they love me, and it's not because what I do, but they loved me for who I am. And so that was my first encounter experience in Haiti with Christ. But then from that love, then you start wanting to share with them and give with them, and do whatever little you can with them. And I think, yeah, those are the kind of places that
I do think it's interesting that this conversation about service, charity, mission, it really began with the topic of healthcare, just because there is such a close link, I think, between healthcare and charity. When you look at it historically, most healthcare began as a form of charity. Even the word salus in Latin means both salvation and health.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this intrinsic close link between the two. And it seems like even in the realm of healthcare especially, there is such it is a call to charity. It's a call to service in a way that many other fields, even professionally, are not.
Take that back. Programming is a form of charity as well.
I'm sorry to hurt your heart, Father.
You're right.
No, but technology plays an important role in healthcare.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, I would work in healthcare technology, so I mean, I would hope so.
You're at the intersection of both.
Yeah. Well, and even when I think of the things that I do with my job day to day, I'm not giving direct care, but part of what keeps me sane on some of the more banal days is like what I'm doing is directly helping the doctors and the nurses and the other providers give quality care, do their job. Even tying it to their mission is in some sense helps my own in that moment.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to that part that we were talking about. Each part of the body has a different function, and it's all working together towards the flourishing of the human person. So
yeah, now an essential part of being in the body, and St. Paul talks about this, is that when one member suffers, all the members suffer. And so it's extremely important for us to be aware of the sufferings of people around the world. We can't just be in our own little comfortable bubbles and pretend that everything is fine, And I think that's another value of like what we were talking about earlier, the missions and mission exposures.
Mm-hmm.
I need to feel the weight of suffering, that just like if somebody in my own family was going through a hard time right now, it's not like all of a sudden my life has to be complete misery or I can't do anything happy or good because somebody else is suffering, but I need to hold it in my heart. I cannot forget it. It has to actually inform my way of living everyday life.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, even the human body is like that, right? It's like when your finger gets hurt, so you can't just, it's not just your finger, your whole body is hurting, right? And so you're tending to it, you're, making sure it's okay, you're making sure it's healing, and in a way, you're doing everything you can to make sure it's healing. And so I think that's a great analogy of for who we are as a Christian community and who we are as, human community, that,
so
being aware of sufferings of people around us.
Right. So everything that we've talked about, these unfortunate and sad disparities of healthcare, seeing people who have to travel a whole day just to get some kind of care. I mean, all of us as Christians need to be more and more aware of this and hold this in our hearts, feel the pain of our brothers, just as we would hope that others would feel our own pain. And then to discern the ways in which we're called to use the gifts that we have, like you have been doing, to be at the service of others who are lacking those things. And there's a difference between there's certain occasions where we can make certain systemic change. We might be in a position, for example, if you're in government or if you can influence corporate policy or whatever, that you can make some large systemic change that can actually solve a problem. But you might not be in such a position. In either case, there is always the call of charity.
We're never excused from it.
Yeah.
We can never, wipe our hands clean of that responsibility for the common good.
Yeah. I mean, charity, it calls us to love and to serve one another, even if I cannot change your state your present state. Like, in other words, if I see a poor person, I don't have the means to actually materially lift them up from their poverty. I still have the call towards charity, to love them and to be with them, to share with them in their suffering, and maybe even just to encourage them or give them hope.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's where everything that we've talked about comes to a head. It's to the head of the body, Christ. Perfect. This idea that, yes, there are disparities. Yes, they're sad. But when we look at it from the lens of this body of Christ and everyone being drawn into this body of Christ, then we can find our own role, our own vocation, the way in which we're called to respond to those tragedies.
Yeah, and I think the most tragic thing in that situation is to not even ask the question, what can I do, or what can I do about it? Like you were saying, like that indifference is probably the most tragic thing that can happen, and I hope, we as Christian communities continue to respond to the challenges the world poses to us today, and, whatever field we're in.
Yeah, that's actually what this podcast is all about. Our goal here is to look at different topics through the lens of Christian faith, topics that pertain, though, not just to Christians or not just to a small group of people, problems that pertain to the whole world, and to discern our response to them. So that's probably a great place to end. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you, Anthony and Chris, for joining here for this conversation. Looking forward to conversations ahead.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. It's a pleasure.
Thanks
Chris. Thanks, Father.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the In Spirit podcast. In Spirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.